Hey, and welcome to the second in our conversation series, going deeper into life stories. Today I'm sat with Mike Thomas. Do you just want to introduce yourself a little bit? You're a legend for me, a massive inspiration. I'm so thankful that I get the opportunity to record this with you. But just for our listeners who maybe aren't local to Cardiff, aren't local to kind of the Rumney or New Life churches, then just introduce yourself, maybe where you're from, what you do, family life, what does that look like, and what church you're plugged into.
Cool, yeah. So my name's Mike. I go to Rumney Chapel over in the east of the city, and I've been there now for almost 25 years this year. Grew up in Caerphilly, which, if it wasn't for the mountain between Caerphilly and Cardiff, would be a suburb of Cardiff. But don't tell anyone from the valleys, I said. But yeah, grew up in Caerphilly and then met my wife at the age of 19, got married at 21, and then moved to Rumney. And we've been in Rumney Chapel ever since then. Blessed with 4 amazing children. James is 16, Bethan's 14, Rebecca's 10, and there's another one. Katie is 9 years old as well. So sorry, I shouldn't say that. I say that joke all of the time, and Katie always gets really upset. Sorry, Katie, if you're listening to
It's
the podcast.
now recorded forever.
So the 4 of them and Jan and myself, as I said, we're in Rumney and absolutely loving it. So for a job, I work for the Message Trust.
Cool.
I'm the head of Message Bus for the UK. So I've got a fleet of double-decker buses which have been converted into youth clubs, and we go out all over the UK and tell young people about Jesus.
Cause carnage wherever you go.
Absolutely, and not by driving the buses, can we say? Yeah, we have lots and lots of fun on the buses. They're full of loads of different things: slides, climbing walls, kitchens, PCs, all the kind of latest
DJ decks.
DJ decks, yeah. DJ Mike is in the house. And, yeah, lots of gaming consoles, board games, loads of fun. And the most important thing is that we just use them to go into communities and share the gospel. So that's what
Wicked.
that's all about.
Yeah, I've firsthand seen the impact of that quite a few times, and it's really an incredible thing. So, greatest advice you've ever been given in your life?
Oh, the greatest advice. A long time ago, when I first started in full-time ministry, we're talking about 15 years ago now, I was talking to a good friend of mine, John Wilkes, who at the time was the head of counties, the CEO. And having been in full-time ministry for about a year at that point, people see that you've got, or they perceive that you have lots of free time to do all of the jobs that they don't want to do. And so I was really, really busy doing lots and lots of things. And I was sat down with John one day, and John said to me, he said, you need to come up with a mission statement that kind of defines what you should be doing with your time. And up to then, I just thought, if it's good, I should be doing it.
Yeah, for sure.
Which is, it's not a bad thing. All of the things that I was doing with my time were good, but they weren't all the things that I should be doing. And so it took a couple of months, but kind of working through it with John, came up with this mission statement, and it's still, to this day, kind of what defines what I do as a Christian, not just in work or in church, but at home as well. And in case you're interested, it's living to see lives transformed and communities restored through Christ-centered mission. And that's kind of defined my life really over the last 15 years. So thank you very much, John Wilkes, for that one.
Yeah, thank you very much. That's great. That's really, really good. We're going to get straight in to your kind of life story now. And so we're going to have a brief journey in the younger years of Mike Thomas, and then have some extensive time then just to listen to some of your stories, and hopefully people will be inspired and encouraged to go out and share the good news of Jesus with their friends. So when were you first introduced to Jesus? What that looked like growing up, and when did you make a personal decision to follow Jesus for yourself?
I think for me, I always make the joke that I was born on a Sunday, and then the following Sunday I was in church, and that's probably true. But I grew up in the gospel halls, in the Brethren movement, and the word gospel is literally in the name of our churches, and so every single Sunday the gospel was preached, and I think probably by the age of 2, I could have led somebody to Jesus. But yeah, I'm absolutely passionate about telling other people about Jesus, and
Yeah.
I grew up in that environment, and that was obviously a really big influence on me as a child. You know, we would spend Saturdays kind of out. We used to call it the tract band, going out leafleting streets. We'd be doing open airs, obviously the gospel services on a Sunday as well, children's meetings in the week. Absolutely kind of soaked really in the Word, and I'm so thankful and so grateful, you know, for that kind of heritage really.
Yeah.
But I think when I was 10 years old, I was over my grandmother's house, and she had some friends visiting. David and Jeanette, and David was a fantastic speaker, and always asked those questions that nobody else asked. And bearing in mind, like at 10 years, you know, I'd been hearing the gospel every Sunday. And I remember being sat down in my grandmother's front room with David, and he turned to me and he said, "Mike," he said, "have you trusted the Lord Jesus as your Savior?" And it just blew me away, because nobody in 10 years had directly asked me that question. Like, the gospel had been preached, you know, there'd been opportunities to respond, but nobody had actually sat me down and said, "Mike, what do you believe?"
Yeah.
Now, at the age of 10, as I said, I could have told you what the gospel was. I could have told you, you know, how Jesus died for you and how you need to choose to live for him and say sorry for the sins that you know, I could have laid it all out, you know, really, really simply. But at no point had I chosen for myself to choose Jesus.
Yeah.
And so, you know, it's always that kind of head knowledge was there. Yeah, I knew all about Jesus. I knew what he'd done for me. I knew of God's love for me, and so on. And that being asked that direct question by David just blew me away. And I ran out to the room. And I remember I used to have a bedroom at my grandmother's house and spend most weekends there. And I ran into my bedroom at Nan's, and I just burst into tears. It just overwhelmed me. That thing of, oh gosh, I need to decide to live for Jesus.
Yeah.
You know, this isn't just a cultural thing. It's not just a family thing. It's not just what we do. This is something for me personally.
Yeah.
And I was just bowled over by that moment. And so I prayed and kind of asked Jesus into my heart, and then about 5 minutes later kind of dried my tears and went back into the front room, and everybody was just sat around drinking tea and eating sandwiches and whatever. And I went up to David, I said, "Ask me again." And he said, "What?" Because obviously the conversation moved on by then.
Yeah.
And I said, "Ask me again." And he said, "Well, have you accepted Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior?" You know, and I was like, yes, I have. And I remember the moment so clearly, and that was the moment that I decided to live for Jesus. And I have no good with dates, but I remember I was 10 years old, and I remember exactly where I was. I've got the date written down somewhere. Probably should have brought it, but yeah, that was the moment that I decided this is for me.
That's such an incredible memory. So age 10 then, and then following through to what are usually quite hard years and years that you got to make kind of decisions about who you're going to be with, and kind of the people you're going to hang around with, and what you're going to plug into as a person. And so what was it for you that would then influence your walk of faith? What things were really helpful for you regarding community or events? And then also what inspired you to then have an evangelistic approach of letting Jesus be known from your personal relationship with God?
Yeah, such a good question. I've had so many great influences in my life growing up. Part of the beauty of the Brethren movement, certainly 30 years ago in Cardiff, was every Saturday there'd be the rallies, the Cardiff rallies, and we would go, and it would just be brilliant to be surrounded by young people, kind of people your age, who are all on fire for Jesus, and getting to know them as friends afterwards, and, you know, walking on Penarth Front at 1 a.m. afterwards, and all that kind of stuff really. And so that sense of community. And also a brilliant couple, Peter and Ruth Marchant, absolutely brilliant. Sunday nights at their house after church, we'd all pile into their front room. There'd be about 40 of us, and just loads of laughter, but times of studying the Bible together and so on.
Yeah.
Peter and Sandra Brind, I mean, obviously,
Come on,
you know
shout out.
Peter. Tuesday nights in their house after Steve gave me piano lessons. I taught him everything he knew. No. He tried to teach me everything he knows. Absolutely
The
failed.
truth is out.
Didn't even manage grade 1. Sorry, Steve. And lots of people who really poured into my life, and not even people from my home church. Peter and Sandra were in Llandaff. Peter and Ruth were in Nangarrow. A guy called Richard O'Connell has gone home to be with the Lord now, but he had such an influence on me growing up. He was the guy that when I went away to university, and actually went away from the Lord really for a couple of months, he was the one who kept in contact with me and wrote to me. So it's before emails, Reese. I don't know if you remember.
I do not remember before emails.
I know.
Confirmed.
A child of the digital age that you are.
It's true.
And so, I'm just so thankful for all those great whole host of people who did that and influenced me kind of week in, week out. And opened their homes to me. And I think that influenced me in a really big way in, when I'm older, as I am now, thinking, how can I pass that on to the next generation? I need to open my home, I need to be available to people and
sure.
so on, and kind of live life with them. And then also the kind of special events as well. I grew up going to summer camps.
Cool.
The Cardiff Assembly's youth camps, as they used to be called.
Very official.
Teen Scene and Super Gang, as some of you listening might have heard of them. And again, people giving up a week's holiday, which is so precious, and being kind of immersed in that culture as a Christian. It was when I was, I think, 14 years old. I went away. We were down in Surrey, and Paul Young from My Stig was speaking. Not the singer, very different guy. And it was Paul Young that I spoke to, decided to get baptized, and so on. So really, kind of big influences in my life of other people who gave up time and resources and money and all of those things to kind of encourage me on my walk, really. So I would say they're probably the biggest influences on my life, and it kind of influenced me to make decisions as I'm older now, because the summer camps and whatever, I'm still involved in residentials, whether it's Spree or the Converge Weekender or whatever it is. I think those times where you can come apart with your youth group and just focus in on God are just so important.
That's so good. And I think probably the story of most of those people, I know for at least Pete and Sandra and Steve, but I'm imagining the other guys that you knew as well, leaving a legacy probably wasn't a vision for them. Like leaving a legacy of, well, can we inspire people when they grow up to open their home and to be a people who study the word consistently? And like that probably isn't in their mind. They just want to love well, and they want to be a people who love the next generation well. And that's been left with you, and that's been planted deep inside of you, is now just innate to you. I think that's such an inspiring thing for anyone growing through like teens into early 20s and beyond that, 30s, 40s, or whatever. Invest in good community and invest in the next generation, but come under the generation before and just keep walking with the Lord. And that's so helpful, and that's such a good thing to kind of eke out of you there, is to see how that's created a pattern for you of what life just should look like and naturally kind of looks like for you now. So in the middle of there, you mentioned Jan, which is your lovely wife.
Oh, yes, she is.
Yeah.
I should do that embarrassing thing now that all preachers do, and they talk about their wife inappropriately and think it's okay, but I won't do that. I won't embarrass myself.
We appreciate that. So you started dating at 19 at a summer camp?
Yeah, we were both helping to lead Super Gang, which is a camp for 8 to 11-year-olds, and we just kind of flirted with each other all week. To be perfectly honest, it was beautiful. And if you're single and you've not helped at a residential camp before, this is where you need to go. It works, trust me. And at the end of that, on the Saturday, I took her to a world famous restaurant for our first date. which she absolutely loved. Never been there before, McDonald's, and
The Golden Arches.
the Golden Arches, and then she took me to Roath Park Lake, and I'd never been on there before, and she rowed me around in the boat, and I laid down on the bottom of the boat, and Jan was rowing me around, and fell asleep because I was so tired after a week of camp. So that was our first date, and is the story of things to come, really. So
It's really beautiful to know you've literally never done any sport in your life.
I know.
Not even on your first date. Yeah, nice. So it was, I believe, something relatively short before getting engaged.
Oh, yeah. So it's the 28th of July, 95, we started going out. And I think it was the 15th of September that I asked her to marry me. And she said yes, which was great. And then the 15th of August, 98, that we got married. So a long
Wicked.
time ago now.
Wicked. So I mentioned this for a reason, but the first thing I want to say is, I guess, the way to know if someone's a keeper is go to Roath Park Lake and see if they will row you around the lake whilst you sleep. If they do, they're a keeper.
Absolutely.
And get the ring on quick. So the reason I mention this is because we were chatting the other day and just talking about what it looked like for you to choose a church as a married couple. And I just think it's a really inspirational story and just a really healthy way to look at kind of life, I guess. And so do you want to briefly explain what you looked for in a church, or what kind of you were seeking?
Yeah, when Jan and I started going out, I was spending the majority of my time in Elim Pentecostal Church in Caerphilly.
Yeah.
I've been there for a couple of months, and Jan was going to Ely Gospel Hall in Cardiff, and they're two very, very different churches with very different outlooks. Both of them fantastic churches, really do appreciate them both. And we decided that, we would find a new church that we would both feel comfortable in. But the most important thing was that we decided that wherever we went, that we would get stuck in. I think, lots of our friends were kind of getting married around about the same time. And it was almost a checklist, of, has it got great worship? Is there brilliant teaching? Is it in the right location for me? Is there parking? What's the coffee like? And all of that kind of stuff. Not quite that. But you get the idea. And so Jan and I kind of prayed about it and decided that we would find a church that we would be useful in, where we could use the gifts and the talents that God's given us to kind of serve the community, to serve the church, and to serve God. And so we tried out a few different churches, and nothing seemed to fit really. And then one day, one of our friends from the summer camp that we met in kind of invited us round their house for dinner on Sunday, and sneakily said, "Oh, you may as well come to my church on Sunday morning as well." And so we turned up at Rumney Chapel, not knowing what to expect. And we sat down. The welcome was amazing, just blew us away. And they kind of got to the bit in the service, where there's the announcements and everybody generally stops listening. And I remember Reg Dodd at the time was stood at the front, and he said, "We are desperately in need of 2 Sunday school teachers, male and female, who can help us, with our growing children's work." And that was exactly the thing that we wanted to get involved with. And so we looked at each other, and we just knew at that moment, it was just that kind of piece of, this is where we should be. And so we started going there kind of a year before we got married. Found a house local to it, because we always wanted to go to a church that was in our community as well, and that's always been our heart ever since we've got married, really. And so we moved into the flat that we bought in Rumney when we got married, and then have been at Rumney Chapel ever since. We started off doing the Sunday school classes. I think again within about 6 months, I think I was running the Sunday school at the chapel, and lots of adventures there. I won't spoil the surprise there for later on, but lots of surprises there over the years, really. But just that thing of, the purpose for us of church. is not always to kind of sit there and get fed and get fat.
Yeah.
It's we're there to serve, and we're there to bring glory to God and tell other people about Jesus. That's always our heart.
Yeah, no, that's so good. I love that. We will park it because I want to introduce just another topic and then kind of merge them for the rest of your story then. But yeah, just the heart that says, you know what, guys, we don't really mind where we're at. We just want to be used. It's such a beautiful heart for a young couple to have. And so, yeah, bless you for that. Bless you both for that. And thank you that you're still invested in that same community. And over the years, we've seen countless things happen. So parking that for a little second and introducing called into the life of full-time ministry. What did that look like for you?
You say parking that, but it's kind of linked a little bit to
I will
to
link
Rumney
them,
Chapel
but yeah.
as well.
Yeah, go on.
In the fact that, as I said, we got involved with the kids' work there, and I think the church in Rumney has always had a heart for community, for children and for young people. And of course, we got stuck in kind of with a midweek kids club or whatever it was called back then. And at the time, you know, there was maybe 5, maybe 10 children who were going along to that. And I had a phone call from a local minister, Paul Hulebeck, a good friend of mine, and he said, let's go and visit Frontline Church in Liverpool. They've got a kids club, and I think that we should do something in East Cardiff like that. So I went to Frontline with Paul, not knowing what to expect. I mean, if anybody knows Paul Hulebeck, you never know what to expect when you go on an adventure with him. So we turned up at this church, and it just blew me away. Like over 1,500 children every single Saturday morning. Wow. At their kids club. And so we helped out at the kids club, and then spent the rest of the Saturday kind of doing training and thinking about kind of the ethos behind their kids club and so on. And basically they used to visit every single child every single week, give them an activity to do, which was Bible based, which they would then bring back and be entered into a competition to win a prize. But it was so much more than just half an hour or an hour of activity, and then right, we'll see you again in 6 days and 23 hours time, and hope that the 1 hour that we're giving you is you know, enough to influence you and kind of point you towards Jesus. It was investing in young people and children's lives so much more. And I remember being sat in the minibus on the way back home, listening to Robin Mark, and These Are the Days of Elijah. Gosh, that shows how long ago it was. And
it's thinking, still a banger.
Oh, isn't it though? It's literally. I mean, I'm not a great guitarist, but sometimes I get to lead worship, and then every single time, These Are the Days of Elijah.
It's worth it.
There's no God like Jehovah. Anyway, and yeah, thinking, right, I'm going to try and do some of these things in Rumney. Now, bear in mind, I was still working at the time for Halifax Bank of Scotland, and full-time with that, kind of quite a pressured job and so on, but still volunteering for the church. And so we started to kind of do some of those things that Frontline were doing, and our kids club grew from 5 to 10 children a week to 80 to 100 children a week within the space of about 3 months.
Unbelievable.
And it blew me away. And I was just like, this is absolutely brilliant. But of course, all of the time then, investing in those children and making sure that they knew about Kids Club and advertising it and going and visiting and all of those things just took hours and hours and hours. And our team was really quite small. And so it ended up that I was working 40 hours for HBOS and 40 hours kind of unpaid in the church as well, you know, whilst being married. And it was amazing to kind of see what happened, but also like it took its toll on me. And one day I just kind of went, I can't do this anymore. Like enough's enough. Yeah. And so I ended up being signed off sick from work, went to the doctors and told the doctor about it. And she just looked at me and she went, well, you can't do it anymore. Yeah. And I was like, but it's the thing that gives me life. And she went, no, not that. She said, your job with Halifax Bank of Scotland, you've got to give that up and do the
doctor
kids
speaking
stuff.
truth.
And she's not a Christian, this doctor, but she, you know, that was the first moment. It was that kind of light bulb moment where I just thought, oh, maybe I should. maybe this is the moment that
Yeah.
I should do that. And then, of course, those doubts creep in, well, I don't have enough money saved. We live in a flat. I want to move to a house so that when we have children, when I've saved some money, when I've got a good car, when I'm ready,
Yeah,
when
yeah.
this, when that, when the other. And just kind of put it to the back of my mind. And then again, Paul Hulebeck invites me to this meeting over in at the time which was called St. Mellon's Christian Fellowship, it's now the Beacon Church, and a guy from a guy from New Zealand, called Rodney Francis, was over, and he was doing this kind of School of the Holy Spirit, not the kind of thing that I grew up with.
Yeah.
And so I thought I'll go along just to kind of
Yeah.
keep Paul happy, and sat down, and literally before the meeting even started, Rodney came over to me and he said, "God's telling me to tell you this. Stop dilly-dallying, get on with it and trust him." And I just kind of went, oh. It was, one of those moments where you just, you can just imagine kind of being pointed at by a big finger, like, come on now, this is me speaking.
Nervously singing These Are the Days of Our Life.
Yeah,
Just get through it.
And so went to see the leaders at the time of Rumney Chapel, and they just said, well, we were wondering how long it would take you to come and see us. Of course you should do it. And so, it was February the 1st, I do believe, in 2004,
Wow.
that I kind of handed in my notice with Halifax Bank of Scotland, and went into full-time ministry. So kind of approached counties, the evangelism organisation, and started kind of working with them and so on. And they supported me with the kind of evangelism that I was doing. And our kids club grew, 150 kids at one point on a Friday evening. And then, of course, the children grow up and be young people. And so we had 150 children plus about 20 young people helping. And then we'd have a youth club with about 40 young people. And then kind of late night, what do we call it? I can't remember what it was, late night something or other on a Friday with all of our 16 pluses as well. So Fridays was a long day, but it was amazing, absolutely amazing to see what God was doing in the lives of these children and young people, just with a little bit of investment.
That's amazing. I actually don't know quite a lot of that.
Oh, wow.
Or didn't
there
know
we
quite
go.
a lot.
Oh, there's more. I mean, there's more to go with it as well. There's a book that I read. And,
I thought you were going to say a book you wrote.
No, I remember.
I'm like, what's the point in doing this
then?
then?
I thought so succinctly to write a book. Conversations are hard enough.
Yeah, for sure. That's wicked, and I think one of the themes of the not only the podcast so far, but the YouTube series as well, is, I think especially like the Isaiah series, is that God has a message for us to accept Jesus and to have our lives, or to live our lives in a way that mirrors Jesus and expresses Jesus to the world. And that message is on us to share to the world. And it's such a beautiful thing that Steve's pulling out of Isaiah from that. And but that will be expressed in different ways. And so for some people, that will be expressed in creative endeavor or as a doctor or whatever. And they're called to that. But you very much received their call and was obedient to that, kind of no matter the financial cost or kind of family cost as well. So it's just so exciting to hear that process happen, because that might be unwinding for people right now. And that might be unwinding for people who just like, I don't know, maybe this job isn't for me. Maybe the thing that brings me to life is the thing that I'm called to do. And so hopefully that may be a go button for some people as they listen now.
Yes, absolutely. And if you're in that position and you're thinking, should I or shouldn't I, then, just give me a ring and I'll tell you yes. Yes, you should.
Strong. So kind of, I guess, gluing them back together, obviously it is intrinsically linked to Rumney Chapel. But life as evangelist, as well as someone who preaching and teaching in church and being a pastoral figure in church, that's got to be hard. But it's really great that for your 25 years plus of marriage, 24 years, 24, 23, 22?
I don't know. I can't remember. 23.
For whatever.
23. I do remember, I promise.
So for that whole process, you've been plugged into serving the local community, serving other communities nationally as well, but also serving the church really, really well. What's the joys of that? And what's the real hardships of that? What's been the things that sustained you, and Bible passages that you've really clung to in that process?
I think the joys of it is knowing or seeing people from a young age grow up, explore faith for themselves, sometimes go off into the wilderness a little bit, and then come back and just decide to live full on for Jesus. And it doesn't happen as often as I would like, and in one way that's the absolute joy. So I could tell you stories of so many people who are now literally all over the world, who have kind of grown up and come to faith in Rumney Chapel, and I've had a little part to play in that. And I'm not saying it's because of me, but just that privilege of being able to serve and to walk alongside them and encourage them, and that for me is just an absolute joy. And seeing some of them now having children. Oh wow!
No way.
Oh, I'm doing a Clive Cornish and I'm having a cry. But yeah, seeing them, with their families, and now being part of that journey again, with the next generation and so on. And I think the importance of sticking around. And seeing things through is so important, and I think that's for me the absolute joy. Knowing somebody from when they were 6 years old to now being 25 and now in leadership at a church, or seeing somebody kind of come to faith at 16 years old and is now in America leading a church, and so many stories of people who have kind of grown up in my youth group and got together, and being able to marry them and just be part of their lives and encourage them and point them towards Jesus and cheer them on, as they do well, and console them and pick them up when they make mistakes and so on. So I think for me that has been an absolute joy. But in this the kind of, I guess, the other side of the coin of that then is also being involved with so many people and then seeing them fall and not yet get back up. It's the hardest. Sorry.
It's good. It's real. It's raw, isn't it? It's hard.
It's the hardest thing, and sometimes you lie awake at night and you think, oh, if I'd have done things differently, if I'd have said this, if I'd have been there, when that happened, and that's not how it works. People's salvation and people's walk with God is not up to me, and I know that in my heart, but it still hurts when you see people kind of making mistakes, and you just, and you love them so much, and it's hard. It's really, really tough. And you just want to kind of, pull them back to church and make decisions for them, and you just can't. So I think for me, that's the hardest thing, knowing that over the years, 15 years of kids club and full-time ministry, 150 kids a week. You're talking thousands of kids, thousands of young people, and you just want more of them, to kind of discover Jesus for themselves. And it's hard when they walk away. It's hard.
For sure. Yeah, thank you so much, Mike, for sharing that. It is emotional. It is painful, and there's such joys and such hardships, and I think that's going to be really important for people to hear, for people in leadership to hear, for people who are going into leadership to hear that, like, there's struggle along with that, and it affects you deep because you care, and because you're deeply connected to these people. As you said, not just an hour a week, but 24/7 availability as a team to be like, we're here for you. And thank you so much for sharing that. With that in mind, what has made you really consistent, and what continues to make you consistent?
What makes me consistent? I think.
Or what sustained ministry for you over the past kind of 24 years and beyond that? But
I think when I look around at projects which are aimed at communities like mine that are deeply affected by whether it's food poverty, ill health, deprivation,
Yeah.
and so on, crime and whatever. There's so many kind of government initiatives or council initiatives or groups that kind of pop up and they go, right, we are fully invested in Rumney or whatever the community is, and then they do their thing for a year and then they have to review what they're doing and then they change everything around and then they go, oh, we'll try something else for another year, and then that doesn't quite work and they change it around, and then the third year their funding's pulled and they leave.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we noticed in Rumney is that you have to be there for a long time before people trust you and think of you as somebody that is local and somebody that's a proper Rumneyite, if you like.
Yeah.
And people just don't trust those who fly in from the suburbs and do things to them and even for them and then go home at the end of the day. And we just very, very quickly realized that incarnational ministry, where you live life alongside people and you walk through life with them and do life with them and you experience the same things as them, that's where it's at. It's not somebody coming in, lives in a nice place and so on. Like I grew up in a really lovely house, parents who love each other, and I'm really, really thankful for that. But the experience of people that we lived alongside with and still do is so different from my experience growing up, and it was a very steep learning curve for me, and I had to repent, after a year or two of living in Rumney, of kind of that judgmental spirit of, oh gosh, what are my neighbours doing now? To realizing, this is life,
reality
for so many people. Yeah, absolutely. And so for us, we decided to kind of make that commitment and go, okay, we did sell our flat and we did move into a house. And we chose to live in what was then called the worst street in Rumney, and we lived there, and I loved it. I genuinely loved it. It was to quote kind of Di Hankey, he said where he lived in St Mellons, he said it's like Butlins, like the kids are out playing in the street at all times of the day and night, and you never knew what was going to happen. There was always something going on. But when you had issues, you knew that your neighbours would be there for you. And I love that, and I love that sense of community. And so for us, what kind of made us stick around, I think, for so long, and still stick around, is that sense of we now think we are Rumneyites. We are. If you look at our church now, we're kind of. We've been there the third longest out of everybody, and when we first started going there, we were kind of new on the, new residents and so on. And you do get that kind of, when you're walking around your community, then you get to speak to people that you've known for years, and you see them grow up, and as I said, they have children and so on, and being absolutely invested in that for us, I think, has been so important. And I think the things that keep you going are those little stories of hope. Where you see the change that's happening in people. That what you're doing actually is helping and making a difference, and so on. And it's just a privilege to be part of it. I mean, some days now I sit back in Rumney Chapel. I mean, pre-COVID times, but sit back in Rumney Chapel and just look around at all of the things that are happening, and which I'm now not involved in. And I just think, wow, this is amazing. Like, this is exactly where I want to be. And sometimes I look at other churches and other communities and other places and think, oh, wouldn't it be great to do that or to do this? And then I look around the chapel and just think, no, this is it. This is home, and I can't, unless God gives me very clear verbal instructions to leave. I think that this is where we're going to be. So.
I guess one of the huge benefits of that is that if anyone walks into your church from the community, they see a reflection of their community, but a community that has light.
Yeah.
And that's huge, isn't it, for them to straight away feel like they belong. And I guess one of the things of living in the location that you're believing for as well is that you're, as you said, you're a part of that, and empathy rises as a result, surely,
Yeah.
of seeing that 24/7, of not being removed from the reality of the situation, and it makes you transparent to the people around you.
Yeah.
So that's such a huge blessing. Or about passages in the Bible then, or kind of promises that you've really clung to throughout that time.
I think thinking about verses that inspire me. One of the things I didn't mention in my kind of call into full-time ministry is I read a book by Mark Griffiths, who works for the Church in Wales in Llandaff Diocese, and Mark kind of quoted a story from a missionary, and then said, we're not called to just tell cute stories. We're called to change lives, and that statement kind of really, really gripped me. And thinking about the community in that I live in and worked in for so long, and how so many of the children in that community don't know anything about Jesus. They don't know anything about God apart from, oh, well, that's a swear word, or whatever it is. There's no thought there of a personal relationship with Jesus. And so Deuteronomy 6, which is a bit of a weird verse really, but it's "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength." And we can all quote that because that's what we should be doing. And I don't know how many talks I've done over the years on that particular verse. And then it says, the commandments I give you today to be on your hearts, impress them on your children. And as a Christian father, I get that now. I get the fact that it's my job to kind of impress those things on my children, to talk about them when I'm sat at home, when I walk along the road, when I lie down, when I get up, tithing them on symbols on your hands and on your gateposts and all that kind of stuff. And I get to do that with my kids, with my four. We get to pray together, and we get to look at God's word together, and that's a great instruction. But what about all of those children and all of those young people, and in fact all of those adults in our community who don't get that privilege? They don't get somebody walking with them and talking about Jesus as you're driving along to the supermarket, or and they don't get the opportunity to just look at the bookshelf in the house and open a Bible, because that's not something that they've got, And so for me, that verse again has kind of shaped the way that I do stuff, and it's just inspired me to think, I can be a spiritual parent, if you like, to the kids and the young people in my community, because other people, they just don't get that privilege. And that verse in 1 Peter 3:15, I think, as well, in your hearts revere Christ as Lord. Always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you for the reason for the hope that you have, and do it with gentleness and respect. And again, that's shaped me and what I do, treating people with gentleness and respect. And sometimes as an evangelist, that's hard, because you just want to bash people over the head with the Bible and go, come on, like, this is truth. Why don't you believe it? But walking the long journey with people sometimes is hard. There are those times where you can kind of do a youth meeting or whatever, and you can go, right, who's in? And, hands go up and so on. But, sometimes actually for people to make that amazing kind of life-changing decision to follow Jesus is the long journey. And it takes years and years and years sometimes, and then sometimes people walk away, and that's tough, but it's their decision, and that you've done the right thing. And I think that one really, really simple verse that just, I'll never leave you or forsake you. And sometimes I think, especially when you work and you live in a bit of a tough community, you can feel like I'm by myself. And not to say that my church doesn't or didn't support me, but I think as a full-time evangelist, somebody who was living by faith and trusting God, I didn't have a salary or anything like that. Nobody kind of understood the struggles that we had. but just knowing that God will never leave me, He'll never forsake me. It's just such a simple verse, but something that I've always clung to, kind of throughout my ministry, really.
Okay, thank you so much. I want to talk crazy stories, crazy events.
There's a few of
Literally,
those around.
yeah, there is more than a few over your years of experience, and I, for one, am always thankful to have you as a contact if I have something in the pipeline, as someone who's either done something crazier, or has the resources to make it happen. And I think you've bred a culture of, if there's a challenge, like, let's work through it and not stop. And there'll be people who say, well, I can't do that. Let's learn. And you're around people like that who's like, well, if there's something in the way, let's learn how to deal with it and get through it. So just pick maybe some stories of where you've needed crazy faith because it just seems so impossible that something's been able to happen and has happened, and some of the stories of that. And also just kind of locally, what has it looked like to, on the streets, impact communities for Jesus?
Yeah, you can edit out all those noises. Sound like a horse.
That's staying in.
I think. There's been like literally so many times where my faith has just been really, really stretched. And I think sometimes and I'm pointing the finger a little bit, I guess. In Western Christianity, we talk about faith,
Yeah.
and we talk about kind of, I've got faith in Jesus, and my kind of pushback to that is, what are you doing to show that faith? Like, you say you've got faith in Jesus, but how is that being stretched? It's like a muscle, isn't it? And unless you use it, then you lose it. And I've always thought, that the things that I'm involved with, the things that my church are involved with, the things that as Christians I think we should be involved with, need to stretch our faith. Because if I just have a list of 10 things for me to do, and I can complete all of those by myself, that's not faith. That's just me using the ability that I've got, And so always looking for kind of creative ways to kind of stretch my faith, that unless God steps in at this moment, then I'm going to fail. And it's a roller coaster ride, but it's an amazing thing to do. I remember being at Spree years ago now, probably 10 years ago. And we had some young people with us from Rumney, and one of them in particular, I will name you, Marie Postons, was absolutely playing up, and I was like, Marie, like, either help or go home. I'll put you on the train. Like, you can go home now, or just go away. Like, I'm too busy to deal with your shenanigans right now, So she wandered off anyway, and ended up speaking to a good friend of mine, Bill Hebner. And Bill said to her and challenged her, and I love this about Bill. He said, I've known you for years now, Marie. Like, you've grown up physically, but you've not grown up spiritually. What are you going to do that stretches your faith? And, brought her that challenge. And she was just like, I don't know. And he turned around and said, you should come to South Africa with me next year. And started talking to her about the kind of mission trip that he was organising and had organised for a few previous years. And she came over to me and she was like, Mike, we should go to South Africa next year. And I'm like, I can't even take you to a field in Llanelli. Like, what makes you think I'm going to take you to South Africa next year? Don't be so stupid. And so we had a fantastic spree, and me and Marie are good friends. And then at the end of spree, like, she came back to me and she was like, Mike, I really think we should go. And again, I started, echoes of me being called into ministry with. I started making those excuses. Well, I can't, I don't have time, we don't have the money, I'm too busy doing other things, and so on. And she was like, I really think we should go. And I cut a long story short. A couple of weeks later, we announced to the church that there were... initially, I think there was 1, 2, 3, 4. There was 5 of us who were going to go on Bill's trip to South Africa, and we had to raise £1,000 each to go. And this was in the September, I think, that we announced to the church, and we needed to raise the money by February. we're talking £1,000 a month. Like, it was just the most impossible thing. Like, what on earth am I doing? You know, how on earth have I agreed to this? And so we told the youth group, we told the church, and then that Friday night, another seven. No, it wasn't seven. It was 17 of us all together. Another 12 young people came to me and said, Mike, how come Marie and her friends get to go to South Africa?
Yeah.
Why don't we get the opportunity to go? And it was at that point I thought, well, I can't raise £5,000. I can't raise £17,000. There's no difference. Let's go all in, you know.
Yeah, no difference
And
at all.
you know, all of it's unattainable by me. So why not go for it? And so we did, and you know, amazingly through like such hard work from all of these young people and generous giving by so many people and God's absolute provision in it. We actually raised all of the money, and 2 months before we were due to go, the local PCSO came into the church, and we had a big display up and all the money that we raised and so on. And she was like, "Oh, me and my daughter would just love to do something like this." And before I knew what I was saying, I said, "Well, you should come with us, Sam." And she was like, "Oh, I couldn't. And so I started talking to her about it, and she said, "I will ring you tomorrow morning with a decision." And 7 o'clock, I think it was, the following morning, Sam rang me and she was like, "Me and Molly are coming. We're coming." You know. And so we had another £2,000 to raise then, like 2 months to go before we left. But we raised it, and it was amazing. You know, absolutely life-changing. And I remember kind of, as we were fundraising, saying to people, you know, this will be a once-in-a-lifetime trip. Like, it will be absolutely amazing, and, you know, this is going to be brilliant, and we'll have memories that last forever, and so on. And do some amazing, good things, working with an established charity out there in South Africa. And it was on April the 19th, 2012. And I was walking around in a kind of a slum, a township or whatever in South Africa, and it was Good Friday, and they announced that there was no more water for the whole of the Easter weekend. It's like tin shacks, kids walking around with just a t-shirt on and nothing else, just rotten food and rotten, like the smell, and it was just the most awful place, and feeling a bit emotional. And then this girl walked past, and she's looked the same age as my daughter, and it broke my heart, like, to think, you know, she's growing up in this area, and you know, she has no choice. She's absolutely alone. Maybe her mum has gone off to work or whatever it is. And, you know, vulnerable girl. And we went back to where we were staying, and we were staying in a building with like massive holes in the roof. Like, one of the lads woke up with a frog in his sleeping bag one morning. And but we did have Wi-Fi, and I remember it was April the 19th because it was Bethan's birthday, my daughter, and I Skyped her, and she was there in my house, surrounded by balloons and family and presents and all of these kind of things. And that moment broke me. Like, I wasn't much of a crier before that date, and now I'm just like toes emotion. And it was at that moment I realized, you know, we can't stop going back. Like, we've got to do something about this. This is not right. And so the following year we said, right, we're going to go back again. And 42 people signed up to go, £1,000 each, £42,000, and amazingly, like, we raised it quicker than ever. It was brilliant, and it blew me away. And then the next year, I think there was 9 of us that went, and so on. And Valencia from South Africa has come over to visit us in the UK as well, and we've got a long relationship there. But that would not have happened if I'd have just stuck to my guns and said, I can't do, I don't have, and so on. It was literally that moment where you go, right, God, unless you do this, I'm going to fail. It's going to not work, and so on. And so far, we've taken over 70 people to South Africa, and we are definitely going to go back. Like, my heart is just yearning to go back to Johannesburg and work with Valencia and the project there, and just make a difference again, and to have that experience with the young people. It's just life-changing, I think, for so many. You know, all of the young people that we took who weren't in education, employment or training, they all came back and got jobs and found purpose and you know, strengthened faith and all of those great things. So would have failed if it wasn't for God. So yeah, absolutely brilliant experience.
Yeah, that's wicked. I think in those situations, like as a community, people always look for a leader that's, I guess, willing to take the kind of initial steps, be like, yeah, okay, we're going to do it. And then that's where the kind of blame lies if it doesn't
Well,
happen.
I mean, I wasn't quite sure. Like, it wasn't particularly a Rumney Chapel thing.
Yeah.
And, we'd booked these flights and we had to pay for them. And if we hadn't raised the money, I don't know who was going to pay for them.
It's always that, innit?
Sorry, Dan, we don't have anywhere to live now. But, God's good. God's good.
Yeah.
And, so much to thank him for.
Wicked. I think we'll finish up with just some stories from Message Wales then, which is where you work currently. I think probably good to speak hire tours, lift events, and all things Message Bus, if you'd like, because there's some exciting stuff that has been happening and it continues to happen in regards to reaching the youth of not only your community, but the wider communities and Wales as a whole. And you work for an organisation that's passionately pursuing the transformation of all communities in Wales for Jesus. And so that's a cool thing and an exciting thing to see you kind of update regularly on. Just want to briefly talk hire tour, what you saw happen, and then also just Eden Bus as well.
Okay, cool. So yeah, the hire tour absolutely blew us away, really, in South Wales and across the UK. And the idea being our mission teams, our bands, going into schools, delivering lessons on self-worth or confidence or whatever the lessons were, but with a massive Christian focus, doing lunchtime concerts in schools right the way through the week, and then on the Friday or Saturday night, a big kind of concert where all of the people from all of the schools that they visited over the week kind of came, and we were able to share the gospel and give young people an opportunity to respond to that. And we saw hundreds and hundreds, well, probably thousands and thousands of young people through the weeks that we ran the hire tours last year, and saw so many young people respond to the gospel, which is brilliant. That start of their journey then with Jesus, and the great thing about the hire tour is that it was all done in conjunction with local churches, and so all of these young people that turned up, or certainly the vast majority of the young people that turned up, were linked into a local church, and so they were able to follow up with higher sessions and able to kind of disciple these young people who'd made the decisions to follow Jesus. And our 2020 vision as the message was to go bigger, to go harder, to go stronger, to do the most amount of outreach and hire tours that we've ever done in the UK. And of course, we all know COVID happened and so on. And it was a little bit it felt like a little bit like a swipe from under your feet. You just think, oh gosh, you're on your back before you know it, and you think, how on earth did we get here, and how on earth are we going to get up? And 2020 has been a year for us where we've done unprecedented mission, with all the online stuff that we've been able to do on YouTube. We've been doing higher online. We've been able to do our kind of Respect Me lessons online, and they've been viewed by hundreds and thousands of young people right the way across not just the UK but across the world now, which is brilliant. Our prisons worker, he works in Park Prison in South Wales, and kind of does resettlement and does things like 4 points courses and alpha courses. He hasn't been able to go into Park Prison, so instead he's been doing a radio course, a radio show, and the radio show was literally for the inmates in Park Prison. And then another prison that's linked to it said, oh, we'd love to use that as well. And then before we knew it, it was actually being broadcast on a Sunday morning in every single prison in the UK. And so that would never have happened if it wasn't for COVID. And so God's done immeasurably more than we can ask or imagine. And some things have had to take a bit of a back seat. So say, for instance, the buses that we've now got 7 message buses. They used to be called Eden buses. I'll let you off with that one.
My apologies.
And these buses are brilliant for going into local communities, meeting young people where they're at, getting to know young people. And the idea is kind of 10 to 12 weeks of doing that, preaching the gospel every week, inviting the young people to respond to that, introducing them to Jesus, and then kind of getting them along to a church-based youth group. And it works. Like, there's not been a project that we've ever run with a message bus or an Eden bus where we've not seen a young person come to faith and introduced to Jesus, but also introduced to the local church as well. And that's an amazing kind of legacy, really, for the message bus. But of course, you can't socially distance on a bus, and so they're all kind of parked up at the moment,
Ready and waiting.
ready and waiting. We're literally, it's like at the start of Formula One, and you get the lights going, and we're on the first light, and all of the bus managers are going, come on, can't wait to go out there. But it has meant that we've been redeployed in different parts of the message as well, and we've been able to. We did some summer outreach missions, kind of working in communities for a week, delivering, a couple of hundred kind of gift bags around a community on a Monday, taking Hawaiian Santa out in the middle of July. Like, we were in the newspapers quite a few times in the summer. And then actually on the Friday then going out, singing Bread of Heaven, a great Welsh rugby song, and being able to share the gospel, doing outreach and evangelism outside. And we did that for thousands of people in the summer. And, I was able to be involved in that because of not being involved in the bus ministry at the time. Yeah. And then we did pop-up Christmas and so many other things as well. So I think the great thing with Message Wales is that kind of creativity and thinking, okay, if we can't do what we normally do, then how can we tell people about Jesus? There's a passion and a hunger to kind of preach the gospel and to get out there and think, right, people need to hear about it, whether it's moving our lift events that we normally run in person or in Cardiff or whatever a couple of times a year, moving those online, and actually, interestingly enough, our videos that we're doing for Message Wales are the most viewed videos on the Message Trust YouTube page.
Come on, Wales.
Come on, Wales.
Come on, Wales. Did we both say the same thing at the same time?
Did you say that?
Yeah. Come on. That's wicked. I wanted to kind of wrap up there because I think we've been able to now unpack your story in regards to personal journey of faith. Like, everything begins with a personal decision to follow Jesus. Yep. And then it's about mirroring Jesus in our life and just letting the Holy Spirit influence the way we walk. And so we've seen how that's influenced you getting plugged in and connected as a young couple into a local church, serving, and then saying, actually, I want my entire life to just represent this. And so I'm going to find any way I can to do that from a church perspective, but outside of that as well, in a wider parachurch organization that exists for that purpose. And so I think that then spins back to the first kind of thing about, advice. Like, what advice would you then have for people who are on that journey, like people who are at the start of that? Not that you're at the end. I know, by a long way. by a long way. But as someone who's been consistently engaged in a personal walk with Jesus, influencing family life, influencing culture in a local level, being plugged into church and saying, I believe God's building his church, and then stepping into, but I want this to spread beyond my community, and I want to be involved in what everyone's doing, and I want other churches to be able to have these resources available. Like, what would you give as advice to someone who's walked that consistently to a younger generation of people who will be walking very similar patterns?
I think, to echo Rodney Francis, stop dilly-dallying, get on with it and trust him. There is no better advice than that. And sometimes, I hear it said in churches, I'm not called to that, or I'm not called to that, and so on. And lots of the things that I've been involved with, I wouldn't say I received a specific calling to do, but it's being faithful in the little things. And also kind of longevity. And I heard a great sermon the other, we were talking about it, weren't we, with
Christine Kane.
I always forget names. And, she was saying about, digging wells and finding that kind of, that water of life is Jesus. It is mucky business and it's hard work and you sweat and it's, but if you give up and just move on, then you'll never actually dig a well. And that's really been on my mind over the last kind of week or so, really, is that digging is muddy, hard work that gets you sweaty, but actually, that fresh kind of water of life that is Jesus, that you get, when you've dug that well, it's just like nothing else. And so I want to encourage, I think, people who are listening to this to not give up, to
Yeah.
stick at it, even though it's hard, muddy, horrible work.
Yeah.
Because when you look back over the years and you see what God has done, it's only hindsight really that we see things that God's doing. I think that's been the biggest blessing for me. I think if I'd have given up after a year or two or three or whatever it is, I would never have kind of seen the amazing things that God has done in so many people's lives over the years, and that privilege, that absolute privilege of being involved in that.
Yeah.
Like being at teen scene when we were together. Remember that, Reese?
The listeners will not have a clue what that's in reference to.
It's okay, we can cut that out.
The first Christian camp, for the listeners, for the first Christian camp that I ever went to as a youth, it was run by Mike, and I have no recollection of Mike Thomas being there whatsoever. I simply remember every other leader. It's great though. You do it in the shadows, Mike.
Absolutely.
You don't
It's
need
not
the
about me,
recognition.
it's about Jesus.
Come on, that's great. Yeah, thank you so much, Mike. I'm always thankful for you. I know as a group of people kind of my age, and especially in this church and locally as well, we're always so thankful for you being a pioneer and an inspirer and an encourager in what you do, and being someone who doesn't take a no from a challenge as an answer, but says there's got to be a way, and finds the way to do it in partnership with what God's doing. So, yeah, for any listeners, please do. I imagine this will be a dip in and dip out at different times kind of conversation, because I'm well aware we've gone well over our time slot, and so it may take a few sessions to get to this point, but please do join in with some of the other conversations that we're having. We're keen just to bring in people who have been living passionately after God's heart for their communities and for the nations, and in their normal lives as bankers or artists or doctors, as preachers, pastors and evangelists as well. All of it in pursuit of God's heart and bringing God's kingdom for either the city that you're in or the nation, or whether you're sent across the world. There is a message to be spread across the nation. So please do get in touch with us. Please do comment. Please do like. Please do sign up for the mail list that goes out every 4 p.m. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to know what kind of stuff you're interested in listening to and catering our content to you. So thank you very much, Mike.
Oh, you're welcome. Really enjoyed it.
And thank you to everyone. See you next time.